So the first party is getting the bishopric kind of on board with this just mindset shift. It's not a change of responsibilities or priesthood or anything like that. It's just a mind shift of, oh, I am over the young women too. Like I need to be spending time with them too. And the next party involved that really needs to buy in is the young men themselves. And as I read and studied Elder Cook's talk, after he unilaterally released the young men's presidency, he didn't say the bishop is now going to do their job. In fact, he said, these adjustments are going to allow the young men themselves to step up and fulfill their Aaronic priesthood duties and responsibilities. That is not magically going to happen just because Elder Cook said that in a general conference talk, right? So there needs to be some training, some explanation, some set expectations with the young men, especially with the quorum presidencies, as to what that looks like. That can be done by the bishopric, by the advisors and specialists, just training. And I think the handbook is a great resource because all throughout the handbook, under the young men's section, it talks about how they have the responsibility to lead and that it's their priesthood duty to, fulfill those roles that might have previously been done by an adult.
All right, today we're welcoming in Jennie and Dave Blaser. How are you two?
Good.
Hi, great.
Now, we were working with technicalities before. That's the hardest part of these interviews. And Jennie and Dave are married, and they do live in the same house. They're just in different rooms because that's the best way we can figure out this technology. So I appreciate you guys rolling with that. But I'm excited for this conversation. I'm trying to think how this... we were connected in various ways, and let's see, Jennie, you're currently in the Stake Young Women, is that right?
Yes, Stake Young Women's Presidency. I'm a counselor.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Dave, you are the bishop of your ward.
I am, yes.
Cool. Now we're going to talk all things youth and just those dynamics of the bishop's role or the bishopric's role with the young women and the young men. And obviously, I don't know, how long has it been? A couple of years now? 3 years, maybe?
This year will be 5 years since the changes were
5 years
announced in the fall.
Wow.
Starting 5 years.
So this new shift of maybe a more emphasized focus for bishoprics and the bishop to be more emphasis on focusing on youth and helping them and stepping in that role. The removal of the young men's presidency, right? Which, boy, there's mixed feelings about that as I talk to more and more people. But it's still, even after 5 years, I still get the emails. It's been a little awkward, and people are still trying to figure it out at times. And just as humans do, we slip into old traditions and then we forget maybe what is the new program? Aren't we doing it? But we forget some of the details. And Jennie, maybe where does this story start for you that led you into this research with the handbook and everything?
So a couple years ago, I was a early morning seminary teacher, and I was teaching, and the lesson happened to be on repentance. And we were just having a conversation with the kids, and one of the girls just made a comment about how she's like, sometimes, when you need to repent and you need to talk to your bishop, don't get scared because the bishop wants what you want. He's on your side. He's your friend. I know his office is scary and intimidating, but, you can do that. Like, go to your bishop, her comment was totally great. And it didn't even cross my mind as anything other than a great comment. And then I had kind of moved on when immediately a priest-aged young man sitting right next to her said, "Why would you ever feel scared or intimidated by the bishop or his office?" Kind of in that tone, like he couldn't even comprehend that this young woman would have those feelings, like it's like, we're in there all the time. We're in there, we hang out with the bishop all the time. He's not scary, which I was like, oh, that's great. Obviously this young man, his bishop has done a great job, with cultivating those relationships. And I didn't really think more of it until I was driving home. And I just thought, there's a discrepancy there between, why is it that the priest's age specifically, get to interact with the bishop so much and be in his office and spend so much time with him, and the young women, I felt like we're kind of missing out on that opportunity. but I thought, like the rest of the church, that's just the way it was, you
Yeah.
know? And so I remember asking my husband and even asking our bishop at the time, like, hey, would it even be allowed for a young women's class to occasionally meet in the bishop's office? Is that even allowed? And both my husband was like, yeah, I don't think so. And the bishop was like, yeah, that's actually a great idea. So 2 weeks later, that bishop was released and my husband was called on bishop. So now, we had a firsthand seat to this, but that was how it all started. And over the next 6 to 8 months, I was just kind of, the Spirit really encouraged me and propelled me to pursue this and to really do some research. And so I started reading the handbook all about it. I studied the original talk by Elder Cook and President Nelson, where they introduced all these changes to see if I could shed more light on it. I informally interviewed bishops, young women's presidents, and friends from over 20 states to see how it looked, how it was actually, being done in their states. And it was just a really wonderful journey of learning. And I came away with a new appreciation for how I feel the young men and young women program, the youth program, should be under this new focus. And so I wrote a couple articles on that, and one of them found its way to you through a friend, and that's why we're here.
We are. And Dave, before you were a bishop, you were the priest quorum advisor. Is that right? What do you remember from that story? Is there any details that you would want to add?
Yeah. Thanks. I was called after COVID, about a year after COVID, and maybe not even quite a year. I remember that the bishop extended the call over the phone because we were still kind of limiting how much we were meeting. But I think a huge blessing was my bishop at the time said, hey, will you review the handbook like from start to finish on the young men's program? And will you report back to me like what we need to be doing or what we could do differently? And so I studied the handbook. I put a matrix together. I'm a spreadsheet guy, so I put a matrix together of all the things that the handbook suggests, and then I made a column of what that could look like within our ward, specifically the priest quorum. And so that was my first venture back into the young men's program after being out for many years.
Cool. And then you're called as bishop, and so did that. It just was easy maybe to move forward and test some things out. I'm sure your previous bishop would have done the same, but
yeah. So I was in for about a year, so we were able to I think implement a lot of cool things as I was the advisor, and I just took an active role in holding presidency meeting and calling the executive secretary to say, hey, I need to get on the bishop's schedule. This is when we want to hold priest quorum presidency meeting, and of course our bishop was totally open for that, and we started meeting regularly and holding a presidency meeting and kind of working the priest quorum program.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just love this example of, this would be great. A great suggestion for if a new young women's presidency is called, or even on the stake level. And then the priest quorum advisors and the bishopric to go back to the handbook, because it's been 5 years now, and maybe, some old traditions have crept into your ward more than you thought. And so it's just sort of, I love going to the handbook at the start of these callings and just saying, we're assuming nothing. We're pretending like we've never seen the church function in our life, and we're going to look at the handbook and see how we can go about this. And then you can discover some of these nuances, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think COVID magnified those challenges also.
Yeah, it's true.
As the bishop, the whole ward the whole church kind of focused on different things during COVID and had to necessarily. And so as we were getting back in, the timing was was good to be able to be called and investigate and kind of implement as we were kind of coming back full force to church.
Yep. So Jennie, maybe take us through this as far as the like, I don't know if it point by point or just generally, what are some of the things you discovered that helped encourage you on this path of helping the young women have more engagement with the bishop and feel more comfortable engaging, with the bishop?
So basically, after months and months of research and reading, I call it the what, or like the what of the children and youth program is that the bishop and the bishopric are or should be spending regular time with the young women on Sundays and during their midweek activities. And that is quoted in General Conference and in 2 or 3 places in the handbook. And I can, give reader or listeners show notes, whatever the actual handbook references for those. But it says throughout the handbook, the bishopric needs to be spending regular time with the young women, not just on Sundays, but also, during their midweek activities. So if that is the what, then of course it raises this whole logistical and organizational question of like, what does that involve? Who does that involve? How is that happen? How can that happen? And all those kinds of things. So that's what I really delved into, is to try to get a better grasp of how this could even be possible. Because I, like probably many of the people, when Elder Cook in his October 2019 General Conference talk said, in one sentence, the young men's presidency at the ward level are discontinued. And he's like, a little bit later on, talked about how the bishops, are over the youth. And I think what we all did is we just filled in that vacuum created by the fact that there was no more young men's presidency with, I guess the bishopric is now the young men's presidency. And I thought that. I mean, I remember we were listening to that session with a friend who was in the bishopric, and he was like, oh man, my load just got a lot heavier, like just so much more now to do. And I mean, that was just what we thought. We just thought that we can't exist in a church with no young men's presidency. So I guess the bishop's the young men's presidency. And so that was one of the first things that I discovered is actually Elder Cook was right. There is no young men's presidency. Like, it really has been discontinued. It doesn't exist. The bishopric is not the young men's presidency. They have always been, since Doctrine and Covenants 107 came out, have always been the presidency of the Aaronic priesthood. That has not changed. That existed long before the calling of young men's presidency existed even. So that, their priesthood duties and responsibilities have not changed with Elder Cook's announcement in 2019. So that was an important thing, I think, to understand.
Yeah, I think this goes back to the importance of that we need to get out of this mindset of, the bishopric is now the young men's presidency, and the structure of it sometimes can, like first counselors with the teachers, the second counselors with the deacons. So it's like, we're sort of team young men, and when in reality we weren't. And I love the image of like, it did create this vacuum. So the bishopric sort of just filled it. And we thought, we sort of act like the young men's presidency, when in reality they were introducing something entirely different than what was done before.
So in my opinion, and this is all it is my opinion and my understanding from.
We want to hear it, Jennie. This is great.
There are 4 different parties that are really critical to buy into the new system, maybe to make the vision that the church has for the new youth program, to make it a success. There's 4 people. And the first one, obviously, is the bishopric. They have to themselves come to this understanding, I'm not the young men's presidency. My focus is not just the young men. I have to be balanced over both the young men and the young women program. That is my focus. And because of that, not split focus, but balance focus over both, I am going to have to delegate and give some things up that I previously may have thought were under my purview with the young men. So that's one party. I don't know, Dave, what do you think as the bishop, about that, about how bishops have to kind of change their mindset a little bit?
Well, I definitely want to support what Jennie is describing. And Jennie is absolutely right.
And I don't know. It's just this idea that the bishops don't have to run the day-to-day minutia of the young men's program.
So
that's all.
So if I get For me, it's about a new culture that we've got to create. And it's a culture, to me, it's a culture of like being dedicated to the youth. As they made these changes with the young men's presidency, they also reorganized the Melchizedek priesthood, and they restructured missionary work and temple and family history work to kind of fall under the Relief Society president and the Elders Quorum president. So in a lot of ways, the church and the handbook is asking the adult leadership or the ward council to shoulder quite a bit of the load. And I think you almost need a solid team. Well, you do. You need a solid team around you in order for the bishopric to be able to focus on the youth. Also, the advisors. One thing that we discovered is if when I was called as bishop, we had 2 priest quorum adult leaders in the priest quorum, in addition to myself, and all 3 of us have busy careers and young children, and so sometimes only one person would be able to show up, even when we had 3. Or if I wanted to go with the young women, they couldn't have the 2 deep leadership if somebody else was going to miss that Wednesday activity. So we called an additional advisor into each quorum, so that there are 3 adult advisors in each quorum, so that the member of the bishopric is not relied upon to for the young men's program to function. So.
And just for context, for your ward, how many youth do you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are certainly blessed with an awesome amount of youth. We have just over 50 youth in our ward, and we have about 50 primary children too. So we've been in this ward for 20 years, and the amount of youth has stayed pretty consistent over those 20 years. It ebbs and flows just a little bit, but we've been blessed to have a pretty solid youth program throughout those 20 years.
Yeah, and I don't think we mentioned, I think you guys are in Gilbert, Arizona, which is a very stable, it's a very stable part of the church, right? So
I call it Utah Light.
That's right. Utah warm, maybe, but
there we go. Yeah.
Awesome. And this is a dynamic I want to bring up that plays into this, because I think since these changes, everybody has sort of felt jealousy of their bishop time, right? The father of the ward, which is another misnomer, an archaic misnomer that probably needs to go away, where, I've heard of primary presidency members feeling like, the bishopric never comes into primary, and the handbook does encourage that, obviously, and that's something they have to make time for. Or and then I think of just the bishop as the figurehead for, especially for some repentance processes and things, that if for example, if a marriage in the Elders Quorum Relief Society falls apart, and maybe there's betrayal, maybe an elder is struggling with pornography or whatever it be, that process there's still this feeling of that process needs to land on the bishop's desk, and he needs to handle it. And I think part of this process is that just that enabling of the Elders Quorum and the Relief Society to really step up in some of these places. And I'll go as far as say, and I know that the opinions are all over the board, that when somebody's going through a repentance process, even with certain transgressions that do need to be taken to the bishop, that does not mean he has to handle every step of that process and have every appointment there. My hope would be that, for example, in Elders Quorum, a community forms there, ministering brothers are there with the permissions that are appropriate, that we involve some ministering brothers to make sure that he's surrounded by love and support, and and all these things. And then the bishop is just sort of there as that common judge to monitor that process with his keys, rather than feeling like, my Wednesday, Tuesday appointments are stacked with people other than youth. And then that's when the bishop gets overwhelmed and we slip into old traditions. Right. So I think this is part of it, to really recognize the importance of enabling the Elders Quorum presidency, the Relief Society presidency, with these other things, so that the bishop can not only refocus on the young men and the young women, and do so appropriately.
We are blessed with the best Relief Society president and Elders Quorum president ever.
Nice.
They do such a good job of just taking it on, and
Dave is
think,
not shy about giving it over.
That's cool. I think and I think that's shifting a little bit, at least in our ward. The bishop doesn't have to do everything, and I think it's shifting more towards allowing the Relief Society president to support the Elders Quorum president. Our Relief Society is starting to do, we're calling them focus groups, but kind of support groups for sisters going through certain experiences in life, to create that space where we can be vulnerable and support one another. I think the Elders Quorum is on board with doing it too, but the Relief Society is certainly championing that.
Yeah.
So it takes, I mean, it's the whole picture. It's the whole culture. We share with the ward, the bishopric, that we are focused on the youth, that we love the youth, and we won't pass up an opportunity to be with the youth. And I think as we share that and reiterate it, and hopefully we live that way in where we're spending our time and the activities we're going to. Yeah, I think the ward understands that the bishopric, we're focused on the youth. We're here to support and love everybody, and we're here to support the youth and to be with the youth.
And Dave, is there anything else you would add just for that experience of delegating, enabling your Elders Quorum president, or empowering the Elders Quorum president, Relief Society president, to really step into some of those other roles? Anything that comes to mind as far as what you said to them, how you meet with them, or I mean, how would you suggest someone do that?
So when our Elders Quorum president was called, I told him, I asked him, would he be willing if folks are facing some challenges, if he'd be willing to meet, counsel, and support them. And he's incredible. Yes, whatever you need, Bishop, I'm all in. And there's been a couple times where I've met with particular Melchizedek priesthood holders and shared with them, hey, would you mind visiting with your Elders Quorum president who has priesthood keys and who has a special connection to heaven on your behalf? Would you mind meeting with him and sharing what you've shared with me and meet with him regularly? And they've done it and ran with it, and it's been, I think, a blessing for everybody.
Cool. Really good. All right, Jennie, going back to sort of this journey of the researching what was said at the launch of this effort in the handbook. I think the first main point is that it's clear that the bishop, it's articulated in the handbook, the bishop needs to spend time not with just the young men, but also equally with the young women. Is that a fair way to summarize that?
Yes, absolutely.
Cool.
So the first party is getting the bishopric kind of on board with this just mindset shift, for lack of a better thing. It's not a change of responsibilities or priesthood or anything like that. It's just a mind shift of, oh, I am over the young women too. Like, I need to be spending time with them too. And the next party involved that really needs the buy-in for this is the young men themselves. And as I read and studied Elder Cook's talk, after he unilaterally released the young men's presidency, he didn't say the bishop is now going to do their job. In fact, he said, these adjustments are going to allow the young men themselves to step up and fulfill their Aaronic priesthood duties and responsibilities. And they themselves will now be able to report directly to their bishops. So he's asking, the church was asking the youth to kind of step up and take on a lot more leadership and a lot more responsibility. So that is not magically going to happen just because Elder Cook said that in a general conference talk, right? So needs to be some training, some explanation, some set expectations with the young men, especially with the quorum presidencies, as to what that looks like. And I think that can be done by the bishopric, by the advisors, the specialists, just training. And I think the handbook is a great resource, because all throughout the handbook, under the young men's section, it talks about how they have the responsibility to lead, and that it's their priesthood duty to, fulfill those roles that might have previously been done by an adult.
Yeah, that's cool. Another thing I want to maybe highlight and get your perspective, Jennie, is that, let's call a spade here. But as a bishop, as a male bishop, me walking into a room full of 10, 15, 16-year-old boys, I can do that. Like, let's do this. Maybe it's in the gym, get some basketball going or whatever. Me walking into a room with 10 to 15 young women, it can feel awkward for a lot of bishops. So naturally we sort of resist this, right? Like, we're sort of like, I'll sit in on a lesson here or there, but I think for most bishops, it's easier to maybe talk with a young man in the corner about, hey, how's school going? Like, you made the team this year or whatever it is, where that can be a little bit awkward. David, would you agree? Or, what are your thoughts?
No, I think it can be awkward. I have two older sisters, and there's three of us in our family where we grew up.
Oh, okay.
So I feel like I'm always around girls. Yeah. I have two daughters and a son, and so I feel okay doing it. I think having a good relationship with the adult leaders is important. So the young women's presidency and the advisors. I think when they understand where we're coming from and our approach, and we have their support, I think it makes it if the adult leaders, the young women adult leaders are going, man, what's the bishop doing here? That would magnify that awkwardness. But when I always try to be on the same page with the young women advisors and young women leaders to kind of temper that just a little bit, and hopefully allow everybody to feel as comfortable as possible.
Yeah.
And as kind of just over the last year, as we've been striving, as our ward has been striving to implement this, I have noticed a change in my husband's attitude towards the young women, and not that it was negative at all, but it was just more like an unknown factor, a little bit awkward, and now he talks about them like he's like, they're awesome. They're so fun. He really enjoys spending time with them. Yeah. And they feel that. And he doesn't feel awkward anymore. Like, if he ever did feel awkward, I don't think it exists now, but it probably did at the beginning. The first time he was like, okay, I'm going to invite the young women, into the bishop's office. And I think he was a little bit nervous about how things would go. And so of course, with any change or anything that's new, there's going to be some trepidation. But also, if it's the right thing, it'll work out. Yeah. And you just kind of have to recognize there's a greater purpose at play.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it's just I just wanted to voice that if bishops are feeling that, or they may not realize they're feeling that, to be like, this may be something you may have to meet with the young women's presidency and be like, okay, ladies, listen, what do you want from me? Do you want me to just be a wallflower? Sometimes I don't know what to say. Do you want me to speak up in lessons? Do you want me to, I'll take this next Tuesday activity and be more involved there? I think it's just worth having those conversations, because oftentimes, absolutely, whether it's a guy thing or not, we sometimes don't realize, Bishop, you're acting really awkward and you're sort of becoming the weird guy in the room, and this isn't helping. You're here, but you're actually hurting the process.
I will say this, Kurt, one thing that I've just felt pretty strongly since I've been in as bishop, is how much we need to make sure the young women feel loved and valued in the church. The Spirit's just been working on me, and I just think that's a real important part of this discussion. In preparation for this interview, I visited with my daughter, who how old is Eden now? 23. Sorry, Eden. 23, newly married, graduated from BYU, returned missionary, a lot of great things going for her in her life. And I just asked her how she was raised in a pretty good home. You know, she has a mom that earned a master's degree, very well educated, and had a pretty good life growing up, especially as it related to the church, right? And I just asked her, I said, how do you feel as a woman in the church? And she said, Dad, I'm so glad you're asking me. And she shared some things with me that surprised me. Just the way that she has felt over the years and while she was on her mission, just the way women were treated differently than men. And I feel really strongly that we need to counteract that, especially for the generation coming up, where they just see the world a little bit differently than the way we saw it as we grew up. And it's really important to them to understand where their place is and where they fit in and where they're valued. And so we verbalize that in Ward Council. We verbalize it when we counsel together with the Young Women's Presidency. And anything we as a bishopric, me or my two awesome counselors, can do to help the young women feel that we need them and they have a place in the Church of Jesus Christ. Anything we can do, we're going to do it. And so that's the dialogue we've developed. That's when we counsel together, we counsel about that. And if there's anything slightly differently we can do, we'll do it. If it's going to improve the experience of the young women.
Awesome. Jennie, another thing you pointed out is that in the handbook, there are numerous opportunities for, as far as like formal, stake training or for bishoprics to discuss these things. I mean, maybe unpack that for us. Again,
the handbook is a trove of knowledge that sometimes we overlook. But I was researching, after I discovered this through all this, I thought, how are bishops supposed to learn this? And every stake conference, there's supposed to be a stake priesthood leadership meeting. So that's at least twice a year. That's supposed to be all men who hold any sort of leadership calling for the young men's, the elders quorum, high council, stake officers like that.
Yeah,
so
bishoprics, right?
Bishoprics. So the bishoprics, counselors, all the Aaronic priesthood advisors and specialists would go to that. And in that meeting, they are trained by the stake young men's presidency. So that training is supposed to happen twice a year. It does say in the handbook, if you need to, you can even do it a third time. So the handbook gives license for 3 times a year, but at least twice, where the stake young men's presidency is training the bishoprics specifically on their roles with the youth. So a lot of the training could take place there.
Yeah. That's really helpful and sometimes, that's a whole nother podcast maybe we could explore, because sometimes these training meetings, quote unquote training meetings, or leadership meetings sometimes just turn into another opportunity to talk about just general doctrinal concepts, which is important and can be motivating. But at the same time, it's also an opportunity. I remember being in the stake presidency, and we held one of these meetings in the cultural hall and set up tables and had groups talking together, really digging into the handbook. What does this paragraph mean for your organization or whatever it is? And so you can really, get out of the chapel and dig into some of these handbook items, because like we're hopefully demonstrating, it's easy to forget some of these nuances that we read once but have forgotten.
Well, and one thing that we did last fall, we had this wasn't in conjunction with stake conference, but it was just our yearly stake organizational leadership training that happens once a year. And so the stake young women's presidency, we invited all the young women leaders, presidency advisors, specialists, and the entire bishoprics to come to our young women's training. And we talked about this specifically, and we read from the handbook, and we had some great feedback from the bishopric. A lot of the bishoprics were like, "This is so good to know. Like, thank you for making us aware." So, I think that every leader, we have to extend a lot of grace because we're all volunteer. We're just trying to do our best. So anytime that we can just help someone fulfill their calling and just have a little bit more clarity on how things could be running is just a benefit to anyone.
Yeah. Very good. Jennie, anything else as far as what was in the handbook you discovered? Any other point that would be worth highlighting, just as far as like the benefit that you found or principle you found reviewing the handbook in more detail?
Another one was just how important the Aaronic priesthood advisor and specialists are to the success of this. Just that their role is critical. They need to really understand that they need to be there, like physically, on the Sunday meetings and the midweek activities, so that the bishopric is flexible to go to young women's or other meetings. So their role is, because we have that too deep leadership role, so they can't just assume that the bishopric is going to be one of the other adult men there. And I know that in our ward, my husband, the whole bishopric, they had a big meeting where they discussed this with all of the Aaronic priesthood advisors and specialists. So, Dave, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Thanks, Jennie. We invited all of the young men leaders, the adult young men leaders, advisors, specialists, and bishopric, and we had we just counseled together and established, hey, are we having regular presidency meetings? When are we having them? Are the boys engaged in planning and carrying out the activities? Are the boys engaged in planning and carrying out the lessons? And part of it was to get a feel, just to make sure we understood each other, and to be honest with you, we were all aligned. Like, yes, the boys are engaged. We're having regular presidency meeting. It was pretty cool and pretty enlightening to see that. And then we just said, we as a bishopric are going to make the young women more of a priority. So we need you to run with a presidency meeting if we're not going to be there. Now, I always feel a little bit different for the bishop since I'm the president of the priest quorum, right? But I've chatted with, I'm usually at priest quorum presidency meeting, but I've asked my advisors to please proceed without me if I'm not able to be there for whatever reason, just to make sure that the quorum continues to function if the bishopric member's not around. And so just having that level of understanding. And you know what? Some of the young men, adult leaders, have young women or have daughters that are young women. And so they're like, yeah, great. We'll carry the load. We've got it. No problem. And hopefully everybody benefits from that.
Yeah. Good stuff. Anything else, Jennie, as far as some highlights there from all this?
Just a couple things in the handbook that I thought were interesting is it says that if your ward is small, like perhaps you're in a ward where you can barely get 2 adult leaders, young men leaders for deacons, teachers, and priests, so there's like no chance. It does say that you can combine meetings on Sundays and during the week, thus giving the bishopric the opportunity to go visit the young women classes. So don't let the structure of the Aaronic priesthood be a stumbling block, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And then the last one was, and this actually was from Elder Cook's talk. In one of the footnotes, he talked about that the advisors and specialists are more critical than ever because by them being there, it allows the bishopric to go to the young women's. And he also said, even though roles and titles in the Aaronic priesthood organization may have changed with the announcement of the release of the young men's presidency, we do not anticipate a decrease in the number of adult men serving with the Aaronic priesthood. So I thought that was really insightful that even though they unilaterally released 4 adult leaders from every young men's organization in the church, the next Sunday, you could have called back those 4 people as advisors. Like they're saying, don't go down on the number, because you still need that same number, because the bishopric is not over the young men's. The bishopric is over the youth.
Right. And I think you alluded to this earlier, said it, that, there's no limit on how many advisors or what's the other term we have? The specialists, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you can call as many as you want of those to whatever help you need, and make it work, so good stuff. Now, so I want to go back to the beginning of sort of the story. Do you have the young women meet in the bishop's office every once in a while, like as a class, or how does that work?
Yeah. So, so we do. We just started it up a few months ago, and so they come in. So far, it's been once a month, right? Which is every other time. I invite them to come to the bishop's office and have a lesson in the bishop's office. So, and this last week, I'm like, I'm not going to sit at my desk. I kind of swung around to the side and sat in a normal chair and pushed my chair back into the corner and just sat with the young women and was just a part of the class versus sitting behind the desk as the bishop,
Yeah. So the bishop's desk, I think that deserves its own episode as well. Just because I remember being this bishop, like, why do I have this Cadillac sized desk in my office? Like, get rid of it. And I did actually get him to, shrink it, to give me a disc that was a little bit that I could actually move or things like that. So, and there's one bishop I came across in Colorado who got rid of the desk, and he has a small desk in the corner if he needs to work at a computer or whatever. But the desk, I mean, feel free to get rid of it if you need, but
it might be in the future. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But I just, some people might hear this and be like, well, what's the big deal? We'll just make sure the bishop goes to the young women's room. But I think there is something about being physically in the bishop's office and just being familiar with the furniture, the pictures on the walls. And because when there's that moment where someone needs to reach out, and they'll feel that much more comfortable going there,
Maybe one layer deeper than that. My concern would be a young woman thinking and going down the line of thinking, why do the young men get treated differently? I just don't want them to feel that way. I want them to just understand that while men and women might have different roles, we are equal, and everybody has a place in the church. So
perfect. Love it.
Yeah.
And we've noticed changes. In fact, I reached out to our young women's president and I just said, hey, would you mind asking the young women, have they noticed in the last year all this effort, this intentional effort that the bishopric has done? Have they noticed anything? And there were 7 different young women that responded, and overwhelmingly, they love it. They're like, they love meeting in the bishop's office. They think it's great. They just feel like, I can read some of his quotes. It says, I think lessons in bishop's office are honestly great. His insights are really great, and it's obvious that what he says is inspired for us. He's so fun, and I think it's great having him around whenever he can be there. I think it's definitely helped me and the other girls in our class get to know him better. They're like, I love switching it up and having class in different rooms. I love how the bishop comments and gives suggestions and feedback. He makes our activities really fun. You can tell that the bishop really cares about the youth, and the bishop has been exactly what me and my family need. So I think that's just a few of them, but just one of the, we've kind of talked about the what and the who involved. And the biggest factor is the why. Why are we even trying to do all this? And Dave has said it wonderfully. It's because we've been asked to, if you want to just look at it from a very surface level. But the why behind it, we've had my husband and I have had so many discussions over the past year, like, how could this benefit the youth? And I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of how these young women are feeling valued and loved and seen and appreciated. It's about when someone spends time with you, chooses to spend time with you, that is a sign that you matter and you're important. In the past, for my 6 months of interviews with random people, I would always ask, does your bishop spend any time with the young women? And the two most common answers I got were, he goes to girls' camp every year, so he spends time with them then. And the second one was, yeah, anytime there's a combined activity. And so if that's the church culture, that the young women get the bishop once a year and the young men get them the rest of the time, how does that make the young women feel? And then the other thing is that if the bishopric is only there when it's combined activities, then as a woman, I felt like that, because I was like, I guess we're only deserving of their time when the young men are also there. And so I really think the church is beyond wise in this, asking us to make this shift and to let these young women know just how valuable and important and loved and needed that they are. And this is one way that we can do that. There's a whole bunch of other things that we came up with. I think that young women, we have the youth for 6 years. And during those 6 years, we have the opportunity here for young women, especially to, as they interact with their bishopric for 6 years, hopefully they're positive interactions, right? And that might be key to helping them build a foundation and a trust in priesthood authority and the way it's supposed to work and the way it's supposed to look. Because too often we see people leaving the church over bad experiences. And if we can get 6 years of good experiences, then throughout the rest of their life, if they have a negative experience, which of course I would hope no one would ever have, but reality, then they can think, well, all throughout growing up, our bishopric treated us like we mattered, like I mattered and I was important. And so they have that foundation of, I think, the way the church is supposed to look. Anyway, that's just my own personal opinions.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Any other point, principle, concept that we didn't touch on that we need to make sure we cover before we wrap up? Or
I think that the final thing is just how do you do all this? And I'm just going to say, study the handbook and meet with your bishopric and your young women's presidency, your ward youth council, and figure it out for your ward, because there is no clear delineation on who does what or how it works, or if it's every other time, or what regularly means, or what participate means. Have that discussion and communicate and figure out what is best for your ward and what your ward needs. And that is the correct way to do it. That is the how.
Love it. All right. Well, last question I have for you, and I'd love to have you both respond independently. And Dave, maybe we'll start with you, and then Jennie can have the last word. But as you reflect on your time as a leader, as a priest quorum advisor, how has being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
I love this question. I was anticipating it.
Okay.
So thank you. As I have served in the church, whether it's ministering to somebody or leading a quorum or class, or as bishop, I feel like I've been blessed to see people how God sees them, or feel His love for them, and I'm able to understand maybe how God feels about me, and how much He loves me, and how much my Savior loves me. And that just makes me want to do well for Him and follow Him.
Awesome. Jennie, what about you? How's being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
So as I've had callings, I have always tried to approach them with, how would the Savior fulfill this calling? And the answer has always been some form of reach out to the individual. It's about the individual. And especially the state calling, sometimes it's easy to get caught up in the big picture, big programs, because it's a lot bigger numbers. But the Spirit gently reminds me it's about the individual. It's about the person. And I think of my Savior, and I think of his suffering in Gethsemane. And sometimes we think of the atonement as this ethereal, ununderstandable thing. But if you think about it as him suffering and saying, I got to do this for Jennie. I got to do this for Dave. This is for Kurt because I love him. It makes the atonement very real and very personal. And I think that's what the Savior wants us to do in leading one another to him.